I met Kenneth, or I met Cadillac is how I knew him. His name is, he went by Cadillac on the street. He had stopped me after work one day because I used to be a staff photographer here at the Jackson Sun, and he stopped me and asked me for money, and I kind of didn't pay him very much attention. I started to drive off, and he like yelled, and he's like, "Hey man, you just gonna ignore me?" And I never had anybody, like especially somebody asked for money or somebody that appeared to be possibly homeless, like really stop me and say, "Hey, are you just gonna ignore, you're just gonna ignore me, And even is kind of like boisterous as he was and like kind of aggressive of personalities he had, it was like a really pivotal moment for me that I had to think about, am I gonna ignore this person? A guy that I don't know what his situation is, but I'm already assuming that I don't want to deal with it and I don't want to think about it. And that was really pivotal for me, like in thinking about how do I engage with somebody that's from a different, that has a different experience in their life and maybe has had a harder life than me, that lives a different type of life than I live. And especially being a photographer and engaging with all types of people all the time, it was important to think about that. Cadillac was just one of these guys that he kind of knew everybody. Like he could recognize your car from like 3 blocks away. So I would like hear him yell like 3 blocks, "Hey, Aaron!" And as I would drive by and I would stop and like give him a ride or whatever. And yeah, he was just one of those guys that he was like the perfect downtown like politician or something. Like he knew everybody. He knew, like, he asked about your family. He just was a man about downtown. He kind of like owned this part of downtown to a certain degree, and he knew everybody. And it was part of his, it was part of how he made money. It was getting to know people and people give him money and, like kind of the hustle. And, but it wasn't always as simple as that. Like, yeah, he would hustle and try, ask for money, and I would go buy him food sometimes, and that was just kind of the regular thing with a lot of different people. But there was one instance to where I think I was like almost at the point of where I didn't want to deal with him anymore. I was just like, this guy just, hit me up for money all the time. And it was, I don't know, I want to say it was in the winter sometime, and he flagged me. It was the middle of the night, and I pulled over to give him a ride across town, and he sat down in my car and he just started crying. He just cried for like 5 minutes, just like big heaping cries, and just told me how he just like didn't want to live this type of life anymore and didn't want to have these kind of struggles and these kind of problems anymore, and how hard it was, to live on the street and to kind of barely scrape to exist in the world. And yeah, I know we had a lot of problems. I know we had a lot of problems with anger, and that just, he didn't last very long in different places downtown, people that would try to help him out because he would get mad about something. But I never saw that side of him. I always saw, this kind of like happy, kind of joking hustler, and kind of endearing, kind of frustrating. He was really frustrating, but also very endearing at the same time. And I don't know, for me, he's kind of like, he was a staple for this area. I mean, I live in Midtown, so I'm downtown all the time. I mean, that's just, this is my neighborhood. This is where I live. And when I found out that Cadillac had died, it really kind of shocked me. It kind of shook me up because it's kind of like a figure of the downtown existence not being there anymore. And as much as it annoyed me sometimes that I would be driving by and he would holler at me, in the middle of the night and scare me half to death because I didn't know who was hollering at me while I'm driving down the street, as much as that kind of annoyed me sometimes that he was always so persistent, it's just like, it's just not going to be the same without this person here, like this character, this personality. And yeah, it really shook me up. Even several days after I found out, it kind of lingered. Even in my household, my wife was really struck by him passing as well, and he knew my wife and would see her at the farmer's market and ask how our baby was. And we just recently had our first child, and since I've known Kenneth, so it's just been probably 5 or 6 years, he always told me, you know, you need to have a baby. You'd be a great dad. You know, you two need to have children. You know, you would love having children. You should have children, because he never had any children of his own. So you know, things like that. That he's a complicated character, very complicated, but also kind of those types of people. When you engage with those types of people, there's something that can happen with you if you just allow yourself to explore what makes those people tick the way they tick and give them the benefit of the doubt sometimes. So yeah, he's going to be missed, and I hope his family knows that that there are people in Jackson that really cared about him and appreciated him. And even though he caused trouble sometimes, and even though he was very persistent about certain things, like, I mean, he was a very important, I think, part of the culture here, and even for me personally, like a very important person in my life that changed the way I thought about things. So.